All right, right now here on LiveNOW from Fox, let's get our attention right now in New York City as we're learning new information about several ignited devices outside of Gracie Mansion, the home of New York City Zohran Mamdani, that being the mayor, as the NYPD saying they are improvised explosive devices. From Jessica Tisch on social media saying the NYPD bomb squad conducted preliminary analysis of a device that was ignited, deployed at a protest outside, determined it is not a hoax device or a smoke bomb. It is, in fact, an improvised explosive device that could have caused serious harm or death. Further analysis will be conducted, including a second device. They are saying these individuals were arrested on the scene and are in custody in connection with this matter. NYPD working out this investigation with our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the FBI, through our Joint Terrorism Task Force. I want to thank again the brave members of NYPD who ran toward the danger without hesitation and quickly apprehended the suspects. Let's be joined right now by Politico's Jason Beeferman. Jason, thank you so much for joining us here on LiveNOW from Fox. Jessica Tisch saying these are improvised explosive devices. What more can you tell us about this investigation?
There were two men who showed up as counter-protesters to a protest outside of Gracie Mansion, where the mayor resides with his wife. So there was a protest that was an anti-Islamic protest. And then you saw other counter-protesters showing up saying they were anti-Nazi protesters. And two individuals, presumably with this group of counter-protesters, threw Gatorade bottles wrapped in tape and explosive materials and threw them at these so-called anti-Islamic protesters. And at first, police weren't sure, was this a hoax bomb? Was this a smoking device? But no, it appears that these are full-fledged improvised explosive devices. And it's really a scary sight. It's the first instance of, potential violence against the mayor of New York City.
Yeah, obviously concerning to say the least, is you have to assume that it potentially is an explosive device and then rule it out. But they're saying this isn't a hoax. This isn't a smoke bomb. I also want to put up here new reporting from Fox's Bill Mallusion about exactly potentially who these are. He's saying per 3 law enforcement sources, the 2 suspects arrested, NYPD throwing an IED after yelling Allah Akbar at the protest in New York City yesterday, both believed to be U.S. citizens. They're in custody. NYPD confirms it was a real improvised explosive device. Do we know any more about who these suspects are? You heard there Bill Mallusion saying they are U.S. citizens. Any more details?
Yeah, Bill's reporting really lines up with what the New York Post is reporting as well, which is that 2 of these individuals admitted to cops that they watch ISIS videos. I myself have not been able to confirm that, but it appears that these are 2 kind of, potentially, of course, and allegedly homegrown, potentially terrorists or ISIS sympathizers. It appears these were full-on, potentially terrorists. And it's, a lot more details are going to come out, but this was no joke. These are real explosives being thrown at anti-Mamdani protesters.
What kind of charges could these individuals face? Because they're looking into this motivation, potentially this kind of terrorism impact or aspect of what's going on with this improvised explosive device. What charges could these individuals be looking at?
I'm sure we're going to see a lot more come out, and I anticipate that the FBI and the feds are going to get involved. For now, they are in custody. There were other individuals who were arrested. One individual was arrested for pepper spraying those anti-Mamdani protesters, but I wouldn't be surprised if they really throw the book at these people. This is a real, obviously can't get more serious than this.
Yeah, obviously they say that it could have caused harm, serious harm, or death. We know Zohran Mamdani has been in office a short time, just 2 months since being inaugurated there back in January. Have we seen protests like this before outside of Gracie Mansion? Because I remember talking about a story where it was of note that he was going to move into Gracie Mansion. Have we heard and seen protests out there regularly?
Nothing like this. And, Gracie Mansion is way far away from City Hall. It's in a quiet residential neighborhood. So this is a lot of commotion for that area of Manhattan. And it's interesting because Mamdani, he's the first Muslim mayor to be elected in New York City. And he himself had bomb threats waged against him when he was running for mayor. He had a lot of security on him. I think the sense was that there was a greater threat, that there could be, something horrible or a violent attack against Mamdani. But in this instance, preliminary information shows it was the people protesting against the anti-Mamdani protesters that were potentially the violent ones, and throwing what looks like IEDs.
Yeah, obviously very serious, and this protest turned violent very quickly. You noted kind of the location of it. I also want to put up on social media here from Zohran Mamdani himself, saying yesterday the white supremacist Jake Lang organized a protest outside, rooted it in bigotry and racism. Such hate has no place in New York City. It's an affront to our city's values. The unity that defines who we are followed was even more disturbing. Have we heard, or will we hear upcoming this week from Zohran Mamdani? Because I bet there's a lot of reporters that have questions about what was going on there, some of his personal reaction.
No doubt the mayor's going to want to take questions on this and want to show people that he is presiding over the city, and he cares no matter what side it comes from when there's a potential violent terroristic threat. But what's interesting about that statement is he started it by condemning these so-called anti-Islamic protesters, and then got into, but what was even worse were these counter protesters that were throwing these explosive devices. So Mamdani, he's definitely going to take questions. This is another big test for him. He's new, he's green on the job, and he wants to show that he is going to stand up for New York, especially a place where we had, the 9/11 attacks, 26 years ago or 25.
Yeah, obviously kind of taking us back to there, and so many people in that city remember those exact moments. What can we see in terms of security around Zohran Mamdani and Gracie Mansion moving forward? Is New York City's finest, are they going to get involved? How does that work?
Definitely, there's New York City is, of course, a target for terror attacks. And with the war in Iran, the NYPD has already stepped up patrols and surveillance of synagogues, mosques, all sorts of places. But I think, with this, people are going to be on even higher alert. And perchance or possibly, like, these protesters might have been emboldened by what was going on in the Middle East. We don't know that yet. But we're already on heightened alert here in New York City. So I think that this is even more reason they're not going to tamp down those patrols at all.
We've seen on the campaign trail leading up to his election as New York City mayor, he was out there amongst the people in so many different boroughs, so many different times. Do you think that will change because of this? Do you think he has kind of continued the theme following the campaign into his mayor tenure as mayor? Do you think that will be less so now that following this incident?
I don't think so. And like I said, these alleged terrorists, they were throwing it at the anti-Mamdani protesters. But of course, there's always a risk and there's always a threat to the mayor. But he walks around with security detail constantly. There's a chase car following him. He always has, the NYPD has a special security detail for the mayor, and he's able to, move throughout the city, and he's very well protected. So I do not anticipate he's going to limit his travels or his events whatsoever.
How has Mamdani been able to balance this? Because obviously being sworn in there as mayor, there's been some controversy over some of his families on social media. How has he balanced this in such a diverse city? Because we've seen protests following the war in Israel. We've seen so many different protests around various global events taking place. How has he kind of balanced all of these world events to date as mayor?
I think this is going to be another test because a lot of people on the right have called him a jihadist mayor. He says that's a racist term, but he also embraced calls for Palestinian freedom or anti-Israel calls, including the phrase globalize the intifada, which many people see as a call to kill Jews around the world. So if he's presiding as mayor over a city where we're seeing a potential terrorist attack, that's going to be a big question. How hard is the mayor going to identify this as potentially Islamic terror? Now, I want to be clear, we don't know everything, but we saw, your colleague Ben at Fox News, we saw what the New York Post said. It's looking like these are potentially Islamically motivated terrorists, and we have the first Muslim mayor. Is he going to clearly state that this was a problem, this was Islamic terrorism? We're going to find out.
Yeah, we will find out. Any other questions that potentially you hope Zohran Mamdani answers? Any questions that you hope New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch? What other questions do you have on your mind?
I think I was mentioning that statement earlier, how he began, condemning the anti-Mamdani or anti-Islamic protesters, that individual Jake Lang. He brought a goat outside Gracie Mansion as some sort of protest gimmick. It's going to be interesting the degree to which the mayor condemns this guy, Jake Lang, and then also condemns these real terrorists. How much weight is he going to be putting on those two issues when he's talking about this incident? I'm sure he'll be talking about it all week, but is he going to focus? Is he going to blame these right-wing protesters for inciting this? Or is he going to focus on, what was the real violent threat? It will be interesting, and it's a political calculation he has to make.
Yeah, so very true. And obviously protesting here in the United States, obviously right there entrenched in the First Amendment. So we'll see what comes of this very interesting developing story there out of New York City. Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You're on Live Now.
Thank you.